So let's get into the background on raters, because I'm sure a lot of people don't even know like the conditions or what a rater is. Mike is going to tell us a background on raters and what they do.
Thanks, Shannon. Let's just start with a show of hands. Who has used Google's search engine to search for something before? So that's every hand that I can see. And I think most people realize when you enter search on Google, algorithms generate the results that you see. But in my experience, a lot of people don't realize that there are human beings who are central to testing, training, and evaluating those search algorithms. And those human beings are us. We're called raters. We work for any one of a few subcontractors of Google, exclusively for Google on Google platforms. And most of the other big tech companies have their own version that do the same thing. In the past decade, most industries have seen at least some, if not substantial, wage growth. But that hasn't been the case for us. I haven't had a raise in years. So obviously, once you factor in inflation, I'm making less in real terms than I was 6 years ago. And it's even worse for some raters. Some raters have flat had their hourly rate cut and are making less on a per hour basis than they were when they started with their companies 8, 10, however many years ago. In addition to the wage issue, we also face barriers on a number of fronts to obtaining adequate benefits. All of the companies that we work for allow us to work up to right under the point where they would have to provide us with benefits. And despite the fact that we work exclusively on Google platforms for Google, Google has expressly excluded us from their extended workforce standards. So we are not entitled to the $15 an hour minimum wage, healthcare, paid sick leave, and tuition reimbursement that Google extends to other TVCs. The company is also irresponsible in how it treats our time in the job itself. To give you a little more info on that, our work is task-based, and each task we have has a time range that is tracked by an algorithm. So if we go over that range, we know that we can't report the actual time that it took us to do the work because we will get dinged for productivity, and that can lead to suspension or termination. Additionally, the primary form of discipline for raters is also an algorithm. And what that means is the algorithm dings us, we are suspended or restricted, and we can't work until a human being has a chance to look at it. This frequently happens by mistake. And the time that it takes for a human to have a chance to look at it can be anywhere from a couple of days to over a week. So what this means in total is that Google search is built in large part on the exploitation of people like us. And that's what we're here to talk about today. And I'm so happy to see so many of y'all have come out to hear what we have to say.
Yeah, that was a really good background, Mike. You know, so many people just don't understand the labor that is put into building a product that we take for granted and that we use every day. And that is the number one source of revenue for Google and Alphabet. But we're going to go through the panel questions. And I'm going to ask this first question to Josiah, like, how important are raters to Google products?
So, as we know, Alphabet is one of the biggest companies in the world. And they built a dynasty around Google search, and they fund around Google ads. 81% of their revenue comes from Google ads. And their profit margin is, I think most recently it was around 25% profit margin, and that's huge. When other industries are trying to make a point about how this industry has too high profit margins, they compare to Google. And we come out on top. It's just that it's closer than they think it should be for the other industry. We are the ones who make that Google search, and in my case, make those ads work. So in order to like describe what we actually do, I have to use an analogy from a different company because I'm not supposed to talk about the kinds of questions they ask us. But when Canon wants to create a camera that is able to detect faces, they need to train their algorithm on a lot of pictures where the face has already been detected. So you get radars like us, but not us, who go through picture after picture after picture, identifying faces, just drawing a box over a face. And we do the same thing with the kinds of questions that our algorithm is supposed to have to do. We do it over and over and over, hours a day, often very repetitive. But our questions have a lot more rules, a lot more logical specificity that we have to work on. And so anytime you type something into Google search, it can select an appropriate series of links because we have gone through it over and over and over again. Any search you can come up with, if it has any idea what you're saying, we've gone through a version of that search.
Thank you, Josiah. And then I want people to know like why people are raters. Jay, would you tell everyone like why people choose to be raters?
Absolutely. So I do want to like frame this in that I'm going to talk a lot from my own personal experience, but I'm hoping that some of this resonates with you. So get comfy in that chat box. I'll keep an eye on it. So I will start by saying that a lot of the raters broadly that show up and a lot of the stories that we hear from each other tend to point towards our specific life situations leading us to this particular type of job. And that can be for many reasons. Like for my own part, this job is convenient for me because I have someone to take care of that I need to be around the house for. So a work from home job where I can pick my own hours in particular is very valuable to me. And there just aren't a lot of other things that I would be able to do and take care of the things I actually have to do every day. For a broader picture, though, this can include, I will say, like, it is a lot more difficult to safely start job seeking as an openly queer person in this country. That is a barrier that I face as well. It's just it's a bigger ask to go job hunting in this situation. If somebody in a similar situation to me could be a parent with kids to take care of, though, you could be disabled yourself. I'm taking care of someone who is, but this is a good fit for that type of situation where you're not going to be able to access certain other resources or have the ability to get to a job outside of the home safely. On that note, there is still a pandemic going. So that has kind of raised the bar or lowered it, depending on how you look at that, I guess, on what is a safe job for anybody. So that's a huge thing, even if it's a little bit temporary. People are taking care of military spouses as well. The flexibility in itself is already just a perk. And I don't think that it's anything to be ashamed of to say, I just like being able to do that. That's a carrot on the stick that we have that is leading people here. And a big thing that I do see a lot of people talk about is social anxiety. That is fantastic at this job because you don't have to deal with any other people if you don't want to. So that makes this a lot more accessible to that particular demographic. And fanning that out a little bit more, just neurodivergence in a similar way, I would say, to talking about the queer community is a barrier to being able to safely access many jobs that are easier to get into, for lack of a euphemism, I suppose. But like there's it feels like we kind of get boxed in by our own situations, and this job is kind of the only thing left up the end of the creek that we are on without a paddle.
Thanks, Jay. It's really informative to show like just how important this job is and how important the people who perform the roles are. All kinds of people in our society, and just, you know, being undervalued makes it all the worse. So I want to ask Michelle, like, who do raters work for?
Well, technically we work for whatever parent company that's hired us. But how that actually ends up looking for raters on a day-to-day basis is we don't know who we're actually working for. And for all purposes, it almost feels like we work for an algorithm. And you see this most clearly in the review process and in lockouts, where those of you who are raters, if you show up at your job ready to work, most of you start working. But for some of us, if you rated somewhere outside of the bell curve of where raters have rated, your account will be flagged and you will be locked out and you won't be able to work. So like Jay was saying, that some of us who might be working a couple different jobs, or who are caregivers who have a very specific narrow amount of time that we have designated in our day to do that work, we may not be able to do that. And if you work for a company that has company sponsored chat, maybe you can jump in there, tag an admin, and they can look at your account. But if not, and even if you can, sometimes you're left waiting for hours or days or even longer to get your account unlocked so that you can continue working. Reviews are somewhat similar in that if you make a mistake and you have a bad review, the time that you're able to work can be significantly cut down. So you're not able to max out your hours to work the amount of time that you're depending on working. And that can last for months and months and months. Sometimes you can email in and have somebody manually look at it, but we have brought up many times the unfairness of a system that has no personal touch to it. So instead of having your account flagged and then having somebody look at it, and then if there's something truly wrong, getting locked out, it doesn't happen like that. We've been told that those false positives are very rare. I posted an informal survey in our Facebook group because that's all I hear about in various places, are people saying, oh, I was locked out, they found nothing wrong with my account, and now I'm able to work again. And despite being told that those instances are rare, out of 54 people who voted in the poll, 43% of them said that there were issues found in their account, but 57% said it was a false positive. So even if you want to say, you know, give or take a few of those numbers, it certainly doesn't appear to be a very truly rare occurrence. And this has real ramifications for our paychecks and our livelihoods.
Yeah, and then like under this same question, I wanted to ask Mike about the same thing, but in regards to TELUS.
Sure. So we do not have a work chat. And the way that ours works is if you rate outside the bell curve, like Michelle talked about, your access to work is completely suspended. You have no access to tasks, and you can't get access to tasks again until a human member of the quality team gets a chance to do a deep review of your account. And that can take up to or over a week. And so it's plausible, and has happened in the past, that you'll show up to work on a Monday and through no fault of your own, will receive a message that keeps you from earning money that week.
And Teresa, as someone who does ads rating for Appen, would you also explain, you know, the situation with the algorithm?
Our situation is a little bit different as an ads rater. The search raters are disciplined when the algorithm thinks they've done something wrong by having their hours cut or being suspended from working for a week or two, but we just get fired. There's a fairly new thing where we can be fired and we can be rehired, but that not everyone can. Oh, it's very complicated. Okay, I'm going to try to tell the story that I meant to tell, which was, okay, we were told that there were certain things that we could do wrong, and we would be red flagged and they would threaten to fire us if we didn't knock it off. And so it included things like not reading instructions, not spending enough time reading instructions, or working too fast, submitting too quickly. And one of them was a repetitive rating pattern where if the answers, if there were a set of answers we could give that ranged from, say, negative 100 to a positive 100, if we picked the same answer too many times, or if within the same, or we were too close too many times, then we could get a red flag warning. But for some reason they stopped warning us. They just set the software to go right ahead, and if they saw that, if the software found it, they just went ahead and removed our access from the tool. And the thing is, there's no like the other people were talking about, there's no human looking at this before it happens. The software sees that there's a problem and just goes ahead and fires you. So one thing that happened was, apparently something was on the blink, because we got a set of tasks where the same exact question was asked 5 or 6 times in a row, sometimes day after day after day, and we couldn't get past it, because sometimes that was like all we had for days. So if we answered the questions and it was very difficult not to get, since we were answering the same question over and over again, not to put an answer that was fairly close to the same answer. And so a lot of people were then fired for a repetitive rating pattern, because instead of the warning, they just went ahead and canned them. And the process, if that happens, some people can be rehired by having to take the entrance exam again and then answer 3 questions about the problem that they supposedly were fired for, which was a repetitive rating pattern. But in some cases it's taken people weeks. In some cases it's taken people months. It's possible, if it happens to me, I probably will not be able to be rehired or put back in, because I started out working for Appen and was switched to Raider Labs, and they can't figure out how to get us back on when we get software fired. So anyway, it's a little bit different for us. But it's the same thing, is that we don't have a human taking a look at it before when the software recommends that something happened, that we don't have a human going, wait a minute, there's something weird going on here. It just does it.
Yeah, that's very enlightening, Teresa. Thank you. I wanted to go on to the next question, which it sounds to be the same, but it's a little. Oh, I see, Josiah. Maybe you want to add something really quick.
Yeah, what I want to add really quick is in terms of how we can get red flagged for going too fast or too slow. On the ads project, we do not get told what the appropriate speed is. We have no guidance. We have no timer. We just have to guess what the appropriate speed is and find out by seeing if we get in trouble. Additionally, these firings, I want to be clear on this, these firings do not come from Raider Labs. They come from the client. Raider Labs does not know we've been fired until it's already happening. This problem goes all the way down.
Yeah, that's very important to state, Josiah. Thank you. So a similar question, but with a different answer, is who are our managers? I believe this question is for Michelle.
And we don't really know that either. It's really hard for people who are looking for references for employment verification, people who have applied for mortgages. We don't have any direct contact. So we're usually left scrambling. There's kind of this like grassroots effort where people will reach out and say, hey, can somebody provide me a reference? And as coworkers, we jump in and say, yes, we can, put my name down for that. So it's just really hard to kind of prove that you work here. It looks a little ridiculous on a resume to be, nobody will give me a reference, or you can't get a hold of my actual supervisor. And I was not here for this, but I guess previously when the company was Butler Hill, they had managers and an onboarding process. And so there's just some.
Michelle, you cut out at the very end there, but I think like just knowing that there's no manager to do the onboarding. And we're going to get into that in one of the next questions, which is, we're going to ask two different ways, but what do you get paid to do? What don't you get paid to do? Teresa was going to take a stab at this question, I believe.
Okay. I'm an ads rater, so it's possible that there may be something that applies to search raters that I don't know about, but I'm going to do my best. We are paid to that we get tasks that we can acquire, and the task is there to train, to help train the AI to do whatever it is they want it to do. But we may have to open up another, in addition to the whatever it shows up on the writing tool, we may have to open up some other web pages and look at them. But basically, we can do that. We can open up the other web pages if we need to. We can look at the page that we're supposed to be rating. We rate it and click submit, and that is what we can get paid for. Also, there's a certain amount of training. It's my understanding that the search raters can have a tiny fraction of the total time they submit every week that they can use as for training, and that there's training available for at least at Rater Labs. There's training available that they can get to. But what's ironic about that is that the training, if there's a problem with quality and their hours have been cut, then that means there's less time that they can bill for training when they must need the training more. So it would seem kind of odd that they can't bill more time for training when they have been restricted for quality, but what do I know? The ads raters can also occasionally, well, they used to train us on the job every month or so. We would get a test, and then eventually they would tell us what the right answers were. It might not be for several months, but and those were called quality quizzes. But now those happen rather rarely. But if we do get one, then we can bill for training for that. So that's about it for what we can get paid for. Now, what we can't get paid for is a much longer list. Like I said, I used to ads rater for another company, and when I worked for that company, the initial training was paid, and so we were hired, we were put on the payroll, and there was a person who would talk to us, and we went through the whole thing, and then we took a test to see if we understood what we were doing after we had been thoroughly trained. I heard from someone from a search rater who came to one of our meetings, who said that when she worked for Butler Hill, they also had paid training, and they had help before they had to take the test. So that's gone now. There's no paid training before you ever get the job in the first place or start the job. Then we also do not. Sometimes there are periods of time when, for some reason, there's not very much work available or none at all. And we don't get paid to wait for tasks to come. And in the tool that we use, it gets kind of wonky sometimes, and you'll have 1 or 2 and then nothing for 15 minutes, and then 3 or 4 and then nothing. And so we don't get paid for the time we spend waiting to acquire tasks or for tasks to become available. But I think it does happen that occasionally they'll have no tasks rateable, and if they're a person, you know, that have and they set aside a certain part of their day when they can do this work, and there's no work, then they're out of luck. With regard to reading instructions, that's one of the things that we could be fired for, is not spending enough time reading instructions. But I have actually received an email telling me that not to bill for reading instructions, that we can only bill for actually rating tasks. And if we don't take the time to read the instructions, that we get in trouble, because we could get red flagged, and maybe they'll set it to go ahead and fire us instead of warning us, just like they did with the repetitive rating pattern. There's also the problem with, we have blind test items that could be anything. And a lot of times there are tasks that are very similar, and there's only just a tiny little difference in the directions for each one. But if you get mixed up and you think you're doing this one and you're actually doing that one, then you can screw it up. And if those are blind test items to see whether, which they could be, just to see whether you're checking the directions and you're doing the right one, then you could get fired for failing the blind test. And so it's important that we do read the instructions and check them to make sure we know which ones we're doing. Let's see, with the tool that we have now, the task will time out after a certain period of time, and occasionally the instruction, if it's that longer than that, then skip around and then answer these questions. But it times out after 3 minutes, so you couldn't the task will be incredibly long and have question after question after question, and it times out after 3 or 4 minutes, and it's not possible to do it. So if you don't realize how long you have before it times out, then people will work on it, and then that's 3 or 4 minutes out of their lives that they can't bill for, because it appears that they were doing nothing since they didn't hit submit, and the task didn't go through. Let's see. Oh, another thing that we do, they have actually asked us to go on to that and discuss with each other what we think, like how long we think maybe the task should take, or what they might possibly be meaning. We'll like, they'll send us something that doesn't make a lot of sense. Can you explain to us what it is that the expectation is? Nope, you have to guess. Get together and see if you can figure it out. So we're expected to get together and try to figure out what they mean and what our expectations are during our free time. And then new raters, they go to the chat, and they don't know how to do the job. They don't know mechanics, like how to bill. And they ask us these questions, same questions over and over and over. And we're expected to train people who haven't been properly told what, how to do the job. And we're supposed to do that in our for free. And I don't mind helping these people, but they really should be getting it from the people who are being paid to do it, not by volunteers.
Yeah, I think like volunteers. Oh, sorry to cut you off.
Oh, yeah.
Teresa, but like just labeling it like as a volunteer, because you're doing this in your free time, is like so important. We do have to like move on to the next question, because we got about 20 minutes left. The next like two questions are both for Jay. It's what types of benefits do we have?
Yeah, this one I think we can kind of breeze through here, especially for time. At the risk of sounding a little bit redundant to the rest of this meeting, we get flexible schedules, which is pretty cool. And that's kind of where the positive list ends. So that's quick. What we don't have, paid training for the most part. There's some nuance in that one. I don't want to act like there isn't. There's not any sort of paid time off that we get. We don't get healthcare. We don't get paid for the work that is not being tracked in the way that they want it to be tracked as billable. Like, I think that we've made a good case on that front. If we want to go ahead and step into the next question.
Yeah, how do we communicate with our coworkers?
So that, I think, is a much more interesting question that I'm going to go at a little bit more length about. Some of that answer is going to be, we just don't. I believe some of the raters in here will probably be aware, but there are third-party platforms where some of the raters will associate with each other to be able to more freely talk. And there is an officially provided sort of pseudo social media that some of us have some access to. As I understand it, is not the same access depending upon where exactly you're working within this machine. So that is why I say for some raters, the answer is we just don't. We don't get to do that. For other raters, we do have this sort of pseudo social media thing that we have access to, but this is also an official and monitored channel, which can easily turn into a Foucault prison situation, if you'll pardon me for dropping a Foucault in the middle of this. And that's a little bit less than ideal, but it is something. Something that we have recently come up with ourselves as a mode of communication has been the petition that has brought several of y'all directly here. Hello, thank you for signing. And we are currently working on some other ways to kind of craft our way around this nigh insurmountable wall that has been erected before us, which is just a giant communication barrier.
Yeah, and I think it speaks to the struggles with organizing and the lengths you'll have to go. So it's like mind-boggling. The next question is for Michelle. It's what issues have we been organizing around?
Yeah, so what Jay was talking about in those, a lot of our third-party platforms that we're chatting with our coworkers, these really tend to come up again and again. Obviously, pay is huge. The company has prided itself that it pays over minimum wage, and it's just barely above minimum wage in most places. We have none of the benefits that they have offered to their TVCs. We talked about the review system and the algorithms locking people out. We don't know who our coworkers are, which is huge. It's why our forced to try to communicate in other ways than you would in a typical work environment. Wage theft, the company is getting so much money from raters who are being encouraged indirectly to submit right at the time that they have to do the task in order to avoid those productivity notices. There's also really no advancement opportunities to speak of. And one other thing that I'd forgotten to put on there was we also are increasingly being exposed to very upsetting and adult content in our tasks. And it used to be kind of filtered, so you had to opt in for these tasks, but we're seeing it even more trickle into our job. And in a position where you have no PTO, you may really need to take a couple hours after you've seen something awful to get your mind off of work, and that's just not available to us. So that's another thing we've talked about. One of the things we've been working on first and foremost was that petition. So as an update, we have 714 people who have signed. 307 people are raters, and I don't know if we can do a screen share of that link to what raters are saying, but if it's possible to do that. This was pretty incredible. So we asked people on this, if Google's existing standards were applied to your job, how would that impact you? And the responses that we got were just really moving. I mean, if we kind of just scroll through kind of slowly here, I mean, people need benefits, they need time. It's just, we're so underpaid for the work that we do for this company. So I would really encourage, we obviously won't go through all of them because there's just a ton of them, but I would really encourage all of you to kind of look through that. Coworkers are what.
Michelle cut out just a little bit, but we posted that link in the chat, so people can actually see what raters said in the petition.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead, Michelle.
Sorry. Okay. Can we go back to this screen with the slides? Perfect. Okay. So that was our first and foremost thing that we were organizing around. We also have done some profile picture changes in our social platform for the companies to make it clear that we are a united front, and this pay issue is very important to us. And despite the fact that we have kind of individually lobbied for this for years, we did get our first ever response from management that they will be, that we've been heard and that they are going to be contacting us again related to that pay issue. Can we go to the next slide? So that will happen supposedly on Monday. Monday, we are all expecting an email about pay issues. We don't know what to expect. And then shortly after, we will be delivering a petition that the details are to be announced. Mike.
Yeah, this part is Mike's gonna speak about like where we're basically headed.
Thanks, Shannon. So right now we're still in stage one, identifying the common issues that we all face, that I think all of my co-presenters have done a really good job of doing a deep dive on today, and then building relationships, trying to find raters wherever they may be on those social media channels through email. It's funny, we were talking before we started, and Teresa was our second rater member, and we figured out that she has just passed her 1-year anniversary as a member of AWU. So congratulations, Teresa. But also, so there were 2 of us about a year ago, and now we're over 30. We have a good section of about 10, maybe a little more than that, who kind of act as an organizing committee and come to our weekly meetings, and that's how we plan our campaigns and plan what we're doing. And we're trying to build a culture of care. I think only people who do this work do know the strange and unique ways in which it can really be psychologically damaging. And so we really try to do a good job caring for each other in our group. And then the vision, my vision is sort of can fall under getting us the respect we deserve, and then everything falls under that. But the vision is a collective effort from all of us. So if you're a rater who's here today and isn't a member, the vision can be whatever you want it to be, and we want it to be what you want it to be if you join us and help us. And I think we can move to the next slide. So the next step we're trying to get to is the committee stage. And that's why we're doing the outreach now, because we need to build our numbers. We'd like to have 10% of the total number of raters to get to that committee stage. But what we've realized is, everything that's positive that Michelle just touched on has come from raters banding together and showing their collective power. And so I think all of us believe uniformly that that's the way forward, is all of us joining together and using the power we have as a collective. Organizing committee is a dedicated group of workers coming together. And that I think is going to need to be raters and full-time Google employees So here I'll say, if you're a full-time Google employee, especially if you're in search, when we get to the committee stage, we're going to need your help. We're going to ask for your help. And we really hope that you're ready to give it and join with us at the committee stage. If you're a full-time Google employee and you have not signed our petition yet, please sign our petition. If you're a rater and you haven't signed our petition yet, also please sign our petition. But even more importantly, to get the changes that we all want, to change all the things that we've spent the past hour talking about, we're going to need all of us, and we're going to need your ideas, your creativity, your expertise. So I believe the link to join is being posted in the chat right now. Please consider joining us, and not only joining, but being active and bringing your ideas to the table, because that's what this is. It's us getting together to try to change our situation for the better.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that was really great, Mike, and I posted a lot of the links from these slides in the chat. Feel free to check them out.